Hey guys, Blade Angel here. Apologies if it sounds really echoey in this house. I still haven't gotten it furnished yet, but I will work on sound editing for later videos. But for now, we'll just move on with this video. If you haven't watched part 1 of this series, make sure to go check that out after this video. Anyways, on to the video. The first misconception on this list is actually one that I still see veterans argue over, which makes it harder for noobs, and then leads to everyone just spreading wrong information. When it comes to twin turbos and biturbos, I've read a lot of forum posts, car articles, and even how manufacturers themselves describe it. The conclusion I came to was that there is no difference. The terms twin turbo and biturbo are interchangeable. It's just a marketing thing. If you really want to classify the types of twin turbos, then you should be using the terms parallel or sequential. A parallel twin turbo is the more common of the two, and traditionally is the one that most people think of when you say twin turbo. A parallel twin turbo is defined as a twin turbo setup in which two equal-sized turbos are assigned to a cylinder bank, which gives them the appearance of being parallel to one another. For inline engines, this case does differ slightly, but the end result is still similar, as the turbos are still equal in size and parallel to one another. For sequential twin turbos, they get their name from the fact that they feature two turbochargers of differing size that operate at different engine speeds. The most common application of sequential twin turbo is to use to reduce turbo lag. This is done by using a smaller turbo for low RPMs, but then switching to a larger turbo for higher RPMs. So again, to recap, twin and biturbo are interchangeable, but sequential and parallel are not. As someone who lived in a flat corn state like Indiana, I never really encountered cars that rolled back at red lights. However, ever since moving to the foothold of the Appalachians here in Atlanta, I've encountered a lot of noobs who don't realize that they can't just smack their manual car in neutral when sitting on a steep incline. Some of them will repeatedly roll back and then gas their car slightly right before they hit my car's front bumper, only to gas it again and start rolling back again. This leaves me in perpetual state of anxiety as I hope that they don't just roll into my front bumper. Also, before someone just comments to tell me that I should just reverse my car myself, don't forget that there is someone behind me as well, so I can't get out of their way regardless. So it's up to the person in the manual car to just make sure that their car isn't rolling back. And this rolling back isn't that hard to solve. Just use your handbrake. Most Europeans are probably facepalming as I tell this story because most of their driver license exams are done with manual cars, so they're used to being drilled in the head about how important it is to use a handbrake when stopped. Not just on a hill, but even during flats, which if you ask me, that's kind of overkill, but at least they know how important the handbrake is for preventing cars from rolling back. When you're on a slight incline, truth be told, you can probably still get away with just using your foot brake, but I would still get in the habit of using your handbrake anyways. That way you get used to leaving your feet free, so you can focus on getting your car started again when the light turns green. Alternatively, if you don't like the handbrake, you could just leave your car in gear, or use a hill start assist if that is available on your car. This isn't just about the safety of your car or you, it's also about the safety of others around you too. So please be responsible and learn how to keep your car in place and under control. I'm sure y'all have heard about people mocking the Civic Type R for having almost as many exhaust tips as it does cylinders. I never really understood why that's supposed to be an insult in the first place. This isn't really a misconception, it's more of a rant. I guess it technically is a misconception because a lot of noob enthusiasts overuse the word Ricer. I feel like they have a misconception as to what Ricer means. For all the people who think tri-exhaust for the Honda Civic Type R is too many exhaust tips for a 4-banger car, did you forget that the Subaru WRX also has quad tips for a 4-banger car? That's more than the Civic Type R. The Kia Stinger 2-liter version also has quad tips from factory. The EcoBoost Mustang can be optioned with quad tips, that's not what it comes by default, but you get the point. Also, for other 4-banger cars like the Audi A4, Toyota 86, they have aftermarket options in which you can put quad exhaust tips, and I see a lot of people do that, and admittedly, it looks great. Personally, I just think people hate the way tri-exhaust looks on the Type R, in which case, just say that. Just say that tri-exhaust looks stupid. Stop drawing this weird correlation between a car's cylinder count and exhaust tips, because that's a flawed argument for calling the Type R a Ricer, because as stated above, there are several 4-cylinder cars that have more exhaust tips than the Type R does, but they aren't deemed Ricers, so why should the Type R be deemed one for that reason? In actuality, people probably just want to call the Type R Ricer cause herder, it's a Honda. Next entry. A lot of non-car people, as well as noob car enthusiasts, seem to have a perpetual hatred for traffic improvements. By nature, this makes sense, as most people just hate adjusting to change. But personally, I am really excited by many traffic innovations such as roundabouts, diverging diamonds, and etc. Indiana was known as the crossroads of America. It's used as a guinea pig to test out new traffic innovations. At first, a lot of people hated them, but later, we realized how freaking efficient they are. Roundabouts save time, gas, they're safer, and are more fun. They don't involve constantly stopping to a dead stop like a traditional intersection does. I genuinely enjoy the fact that you could drive from one side of Indiana to the other without ever having to stop, because that made driving very enjoyable. So you can only imagine my disappointment when I moved to a metropolitan area like Atlanta, where I would come to a stop every 2 feet due to traffic. Even in the countryside of Georgia, when no one else is around, I still have to come to a complete stop at stop signs, which I'm not complaining about, by the way, because you still have to do that for safety purposes. I'm not going to run a stop sign. But I do think that is a huge missed opportunity for efficiency. Back to the topic at hand though, for traffic improvements, a lot of my out-of-state car friends would always complain about how confusing roundabouts and diverging diamonds were, and that's why they'll never be efficient and always will be more dangerous. In reality, it's quite the opposite. They're only confusing for the first few times. Psychology has proven that when you're in an unfamiliar setting, you do pay more attention, which is very vital when driving. Here are some statistics if you don't believe me. When it comes to safety in regards to cars, pedestrians, and collisions, roundabouts have an overall 37% less collisions than traditional intersections. And even if a collision does occur, it's 90% less likely to be fatal, since the angle that you hit the other cars or pedestrians at are not as direct as a traditional intersection. When it comes to traffic efficiency, roundabouts on average reduce delays from 15 to 20%, and in some areas like Washington, it can be as high as 89%. The best part is, a roundabout doesn't need as much maintenance, since they don't rely on electricity to be powered. The only downside of a roundabout is that they do take more space than a traditional intersection. But in my opinion, this is a sacrifice worth making for all the other long-term benefits they provide. The final entry on this list is a very controversial one. A lot of beginner enthusiasts like to write off racing as not being a real sport. This is usually because a lot of the general public thinks the same, so it's easy to understand why one would jump onto this bandwagon. But sit down and listen, because I'm about to tell you why racing is a sport. A common misconception is that the car does all the work, which isn't true, because if that were the case, why even have someone drive it? Just make the car drive itself and use AI or something. It is true that racing has a higher emphasis on equipment than most sports do, but from a sheer athleticism standpoint, it does indeed pass. Anyway, onto the facts. Racers experience an elevated heart rate of 170 to 190 BPM that is consistent for a long duration throughout the course of the whole race. Not just anyone can do this, as all racers still undergo very strict diets and intense exercise in order to achieve such cardiovascular strength and endurance. These drivers also sweat up to 9 pounds of their body weight, and this is due to the intensity of racing, but also because their race cars have no creature comforts such as AC. The most important aspect, however, is G-force. A lot of wannabe hard asses want to think that racing can be done by anyone, but after experiencing speeds beyond 200 miles per hour, while also trying to slow down extremely fast, take a corner, and also launch off again, it's not an easy task for anyone, especially if done for hours on end. Think of the fastest roller coaster you've ridden, and then think of it going 3 times faster, and then imagine riding that for several hours. Most of you guys would have probably thrown up your guts by then, or even worse, blacked out. Of course, racing doesn't involve going upside down like a roller coaster does, but the speed and G-force is comparable, if not more intense at times. Donovan McNabb is known for his statement of not wanting to acknowledge race car drivers as athletes, but what he failed to realize is that they are still exercising the whole duration of the race. It's just a different type of exercise. In a ball sport like football, you're transferring your energy to a football whenever you throw it. And by football, I mean American football, by the way, for all the European viewers who are like, what do you mean you kick a ball, not throw it? In American football, you throw it. Anyways, you also exert energy when you run, dodge, tackle, or get tackled. In racing, instead of generating force into an item that you throw, you yourself are the item that is receiving the force, as Mother Nature herself is pressing against you as hard as she can. Many people would probably black out from the sheer speed of most Formula cars, as they experience upwards to 4 to 5 Gs when braking, cornering, and of course speeding down straights. You're going to feel heavier, your heart is going to beat faster, you're going to sweat, but most importantly, you're going to feel so connected to your vehicle that it makes you feel alive in the same way any other sport makes you feel alive. And even if you are physically fit, the amount of coordination, finesse, and practice it takes to keep one of those insanely powerful machines under control is not an easy task, especially if you're aiming for the best lap time possible. I like to think of racing, skateboarding, and shooting as misunderstood sports that prioritize coordination over sheer strength. This is also why I feel very bad for video gamers, but let's be real, the amount of coordination in racing, skating, and shooting is probably more than gaming, so if they already get the short end of the stick for not being considered a sport, it's only going to be harder for gamers, but that's another topic for another time. For now though, understand that just because the sport doesn't look physically strenuous on the outside, doesn't mean that it's still not physically strenuous. That's going to be it for this video, and if you're new here and love regular uploads about cars, then make sure to like the video, subscribe, and smack the bell for future notifications. Again, make sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already, but until then, see y'all next time, Blade Angel out.